thanks to all the hardworking drivers across the U.S. from the Allen Len Company.
Despite what you may have read recently, there is, in fact, a truck parking shortage, debunking a new report that says otherwise.
Plus, a new warning about the threat of cyber attacks from China on equipment that might be in your cab right now. How to stay safe. Welcome to Trucking with OIDA. I'm Scott Thompson.
And I'm Ashley Blackford.
Ashley, good to see you.
Nice to see you. How's it going?
Doing fine. Do you know in 1998 which company was founded on this day? Too much time. Google. Google was founded in 1998. Yeah, can you imagine a life without Google?
No. My goodness, no.
Right? It's hard to even remember what life was like before the internet and all this, but here we are.
Well, I mean, I would have only been 8, so I really don't remember life before.
Way to rub that in. And if we didn't have the internet, one of the topics we're going to talk about today may not have spread as quickly as it has. This is a new report that you may have seen out there about the truck parking shortage. This report is saying there is not a truck parking shortage. I think we are all very aware that there is, in fact, a truck parking shortage. Andrew King of the OID Foundation saw this report, jumped out of his seat through the ceiling, and landed eventually. He will land in our studio here to talk about this report and exactly why it is such a bad conclusion that they came to. So looking forward to that conversation. Also going to speak with Artie Crawford of the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. He's a director of cybersecurity there. They've got a new report out recently that talked about the threat of China essentially targeting equipment that, again, you may find in your truck. So
just scary to think about.
It is very scary to think about, but sadly something we do need to think about here, in the years to come and what that may mean for everybody out there. In the meantime, should we hit some news real quick, Ashley?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's start here with the FMCSA's Under 21 Pilot Program, officially called the Safe Driver Apprenticeship Pilot Program. It is coming to an end. The agency posted recently. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Because participation in this program has not been robust, shall we say. It's coming to an end on November 7th. Again, I think it's safe to say that participation and the point of this program has not lived up to expectations that were out there. Participation so far, 3 years in, as of June 30th, 211 motor carriers had applied to participate. As of June 30th, 62 carriers were approved to participate, and we've had just 80 drivers, 80 apprenticeship drivers participating as of June 30th. Keep in mind that when this program was conceived back in, 2022 is when it started, they were set up to accommodate 1,000 carriers, 3,000 enrolled apprentices. So again, underwhelming numbers when you consider the targets there, all coming to an end on November 7th. We'll see what they do with those numbers, we'll see what they do with the data, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I believe we've mentioned this before, but one thing OOIDA is very good at is a comment period. You can rest assured they will always submit a comment. The most recent one was for the next highway bill. USDOT asked for public input, and of course, OOIDA delivered. Association President Todd Spencer applauded the department's actions to improve working conditions for truck drivers, but he added that truckers now need lawmakers to embrace the new approach taken by the White House. He said, he believes this can be done with bipartisan manner and to promote highway safety, improve driver recruitment and retention, and increase the supply chain efficiency. 14-page letter that OOIDA submitted there addressing
pages.
All the things they support and the things that they don't. Mark Schremer at Landline Magazine wrote a very detailed article. If you're curious about that, you can check that out at landline.media. You can also submit comments, and the link to do that is on there as well.
This will be a big talking point over the coming months as legislators try to figure out how to reconcile all these things. So we'll keep an eye on that.
For sure.
Also keeping an eye again on that truck parking study, and I'll use air quotes there, courtesy of the Truck Parking Club. Andrew King of the OID Foundation is going to be up right after the short commercial break to talk about that and debunk it all. And welcome back. It's time we address a report that when I saw this initial reporting on it, Ashley, I had quite literally a visceral reaction. I remember thinking, what? It comes from the Truck Parking Club. It makes a quite frankly, wild assertion about the truck parking crisis, and we're going to talk about it more than a few times, I'm sure, here on the show over the coming days and weeks. Our first crack at it here comes with the help of Andrew King, friend of the show, friend of ours, director of the OOIDA Foundation. Andrew, always good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We could start anywhere, at any number of places with this report here. I want to start, however, with talking about who or what the Truck Parking Club is. I think most people know about the company, Andrew,
Yes.
but it is important, I think, in the context of this conversation, when we're talking about what this report says, consider the source. And that's important when you're doing research and reports, correct?
Yeah, in general, that is always key is, where are they coming from and where are they going? So what might be their goal in something like this? And usually, depending on who's funding research, that really says a lot about what the conclusions are going to be. I wish it wasn't that way, but it's kind of the world that we live in. I mean, just take, for example, any sort of, marketing campaign where one will say, I think of caffeine. You'll have one research that says caffeine's bad, and then you have another research that says caffeine's good. Well, which one is it?
As I drink my coffee?
As you drink your coffee. Well, and a lot of that depends on, who funded that, right? And I'm using that as a very practical example of why it's important to understand who the Truck Parking Club is, what their business model is, what their end goal might be. Obviously, they are an entity that provides pay parking.
Yep.
That connects maybe spaces that wouldn't be accessible, that truckers wouldn't know of, but at a price. Right.
Yep.
And so that's good to keep in mind as you're, kind of laying that foundation and all the things that we discuss, because that really permeates, the objective of the study, I think.
Yeah, important to keep that in mind. Now, what the Truck Parking Club is claiming here in this report, among many things, is that there is no truck parking shortage. And we'll talk about how they came to that conclusion. But first, I want to start with kind of a basic question. Is there a truck parking shortage?
Yes.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
I mean, that has been validated by lots of research. There is a claim in the report that states that and actually they say it twice, that there is there's a scarce of data, scarce of evidence on the truck parking problem, whether it be traffic data and parking demand or just flows and things of that nature. They say there's not really much out there. Well, that is absolutely not true. There is dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of studies on truck parking. Federal Highway literally has a clearinghouse of truck parking studies, tons and tons of truck parking studies. I mean, there's not a scarcity of data or information regarding this. And they all come to the same conclusion. There is a shortage of parking, and it is a crisis, and it is a safety issue. Yeah. I mean, the whole foundational conclusion of Jason's law was that there is a parking crisis in every state, and it is a critical safety issue. So to say that there is no shortage, one, flies in the face of research, and it also flies in the face of truck drivers' experience.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these studies include surveys of real truck drivers. Jason's law had 8,000 drivers take part of that survey. That is an insane amount for any type of survey or any type of research. That is a statistically very large sample. And they all, 75% of those said that they regularly have problems finding truck parking. So to say that hey guys, there's no truck parking shortage.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's news to me, especially to drivers on the road who are literally experiencing that all the time.
Yeah.
You, Andrew, are, and we've talked to you so many times about various reports that the foundation, your foundation has put out, other reports that other people have put out. I can only imagine, again, I quite literally, when I saw this report and I saw the conclusion that they came to, that they're again claiming there is no truck parking shortage, I had a visceral reaction. I literally thought, like what? Like
how did you get there?
Yeah,
sort of thing.
And that's well, I guess we'll get there too. But
yeah.
my question to you, I think, I'm curious if the fly on the wall in your office when you saw the report, did you jump out of your? I mean,
what was
how
your
did you react?
reaction?
Yeah.
I mean, I was pretty angry.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have the same kind of reaction, very, very frustrated, kind of, shaking my head. I'm sure Charles, who's our research analyst, who's right next to me, probably heard me go, "What in the world? How did they come up with that?" And then we would talk about it a little bit. So, yeah.
So let's talk about it, because we know what their conclusion is, and I think we can gather what their goal is in coming to that conclusion. Again,
Yes.
considering the source.
Correct.
But talk about the path that leads us to that destination. And I know I'm looking at you right now. You've got 4 full pages of notes in front of you.
Yeah.
You have been looking at this study, and you have been looking at the ways in which it does not compute. And you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But talk about the path that they take, the winding path or
Yeah,
whatever
we
they
give
take.
kind of like a summary of how they got to.
How did they get to this point to say that there is no truck parking
Right.
charge? Yeah.
Well, and the best that I can figure, because it doesn't exactly make sense, but they come up with a number for how many trucks there might be. And then from how many trucks there might be, they try to figure out how many active truck drivers are on the road at any given time. And then how many, not parking spots, but parking slots, and we'll get to that maybe later, which is kind of confusing, that they might need. So if there's so many active drivers, and we're assuming that every driver needs to take at least 3 stops per day, then we're going to multiply that by 3 and then come up with a number. And then we're going to add to that number without explaining how we got there. We're going to magnify that number some more, just to kind of get a picture of how much demand there might be. And then, so now we have demand, we have a baseline. So now how much supply is there? So that's the next part of the study. And that is really focusing on, what they call traditional and non-traditional sources. So traditional is like truck stops and public rest areas, those 2. So the other 4 are things that they said have never before been considered. And that is things like diners and shippers, restaurants. I mean, I guess that's kind of diners. They had something else. There was 4 other ones.
Sure.
And they were kind of, they're a little head scratching. And then they tried to figure out how many places that those might provide. So they tried to figure out the number of entities there were for each of those 4 throughout the country. And then how much of those, like how many parking spots they might have available in each one, which percentage would actually be available, and then they just like multiply it across.
Yeah.
And so they come up with this like 23 some odd million.
I'm not a mathematician, but something's not.
The math ain't math.
The math ain't math.
No, it's
it's mathing, but maybe the logic isn't
correct. I mean,
logicking.
Yes.
I don't know.
So the way we kind of summarize it very well, I feel like in our research, and we're going to come out with a kind of paper kind of summarizing some of the things that we have found to be wrong, is that if you think of it like a river, there's these upstream numbers, and they all impact the downstream conclusion. So if you put in some just throwing in some stuff, numbers upstream, then you can make it say anything you want downstream. And that's kind of what we're seeing. That's where it really just doesn't make sense for many, many reasons.
Right. So you mentioned something there, and I think we should explore it a little bit, because we always talk in truck parking spots.
Yeah.
You mentioned truck parking slots.
Yes, a never before seen statistic.
Yes.
Slots.
Talk about that, because it factors into what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Because it magnifies the level of supply by a ton, as well as their supposed demand. So their idea of a slot is, take, for example, you had a truck, at a truck stop. You have one parking place, but that parking place isn't going to be occupied by one driver for the whole day.
Sure.
So it can be used multiple times.
Right.
So you could have, 2 10-hour breaks. You could have 32 like shorter breaks. There's different slots available. Does that make sense? That's kind of how they view it. So that really amplifies the number of both demand and supply available. But the funny thing is, they by their own admission, they admit that, truck parking is really about 10-hour rest breaks. And so for 10-hour rest breaks, there's a much smaller number of available spaces for them to use. That most of these millions and millions and millions of possible slots that are available right now, we just need to connect truckers to them, are actually slots where you wouldn't be able to do a 10-hour rest break.
Right.
And that's if these slots even exist, because they're all theoretical. They're not real.
Yeah.
In a sense. It's like EPA, for example, in their greenhouse gas phase 3 rule, they make up vehicles that don't exist to figure out what they might need to make them and how much it might cost.
Right.
But the vehicles don't exist. There's no vehicle.
Yeah.
Whatsoever.
You just dreamed it up.
You just made it up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they did here. These parking spots may or may not exist. They just made them up and said, here, there's a lot of supply.
Yeah.
Wow.
The issue I have with these things too, we're talking about you've dreamed this up. You talked about earlier. The reality is, you talk to any truck driver out there.
Yes, exactly.
And there's a truck parking shortage.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
They don't know what they're talking about. They
Right,
don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know.
Yeah. And that's the assertion that we're hearing here.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
And again, I think we have to consider the source of this and what they're trying to do. And
Correct.
I don't want to jump to any conclusions about what they're trying to do. But again, considering they are a paid truck parking company.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would say, no, that wasn't our intention. But it's kind of hard to not jump to that, considering how the report is done and what it ends up, kind of some of the conclusions that it comes to, or kind of lead you to think, yeah, maybe that's what was going on.
So we have talked time and time again about the myth of and I always use air quotes, the myth of a driver shortage.
Yes.
This seems to have that kind of stink, I guess, written, all over it as well. We've spoken about the dangers of perpetuating the driver shortage myth. I'm curious if we could apply that to this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I've always said that the driver shortage myth, it's kind of a semantics debate. If you start talking about retention problems and turnover, if you look at it that way, you could say, yeah, there is kind of a shortage because we keep churning people in and out, right?
Sure.
That's the actual issue here.
Right.
What is the danger here, I guess, in perpetuating or starting a myth, I guess, about there being being no truck parking shortage?
Well, the biggest one that comes to mind is that it could ruin efforts to increase, dedicated funding, or even increase. I actually have a dedicated fund for truck parking investment, which is currently a bill that the Truck Parking Improvement Safety Act, right?
Yep.
Which is to dedicate like $750 million for truck parking. Well, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no need, because now there is actually no parking shortage, well, then we don't need that fund.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, that money could be spent elsewhere, not in the public sector, but in maybe private sector. So to me, that is the most glaring and biggest danger behind this, is that real needs. There is a true need for truck parking, actual spaces being built. And this could potentially damage that or ruin some of the steps, the progress that has been made in that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's, to me, number one.
Right. The shipper aspect of this too. And
true, that's a good point.
Talk about this, right? Because they had mentioned that
you could be monetizing. Shippers and receivers could potentially monetize their parking. And by that, I mean, if you were to come and deliver a load, maybe they charge you now to even just wait at their facility.
Yeah.
Because most shippers...
Truckers they don't have enough to pay for. Why
not? Exactly. Just add a little bit more. Shippers already don't typically allow people to stay on their property. Some do, most don't. And so to add to that even just coming onto the property to wait, now you add more costs to them. So it's not just you're paying for detention, but now you're paying to park for detention, which is ridiculous. And as we've talked about many times, unfortunately, the lay of the land right now for freight rates is very low and costs are incredibly high, and they keep going up. In fact, diesel costs are continuing to rise, unfortunately. And so that it all creates the situation, the perfect storm to put people out of business. So that's true. That's another good point. I'm glad that you mentioned that, as far as like the dangers of saying that there is no parking crisis, and that you could potentially use your available space to monetize things even more. That could be another added danger to the industry.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed, over the past couple of days of talking about this, my social media is just inundated with truck parking club advertisements. They have, a lot of truck drivers saying how amazing they are and how helpful they are. From your perspective, with the paid parking model, what have you heard from truck drivers and how they feel about that?
I'm pretty upset. I mean, in general, and we actually did a survey not that long ago on truck parking, and specifically paid truck parking. A lot of people, don't use it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they need, just the idea, the principle behind it is kind of insulting and infuriating to them. And so that sometimes that truck parking goes strictly, it goes unused. And for those who even are company drivers, if they do have to use it, they are not always reimbursed. In fact, a lot of them, over half of them, are not reimbursed for using paid truck parking spaces. So, I think in general, from our surveys of our membership, people are generally against paid parking. But at the same time, there are instances where it is necessary. It can be used. It's kind of like we talk about brokers or load boards or factoring. It would be best that you didn't have to use it. But sometimes, to be honest, you kind of do.
Mm-hmm.
And so they meet that need. And they're not the only ones who provide that kind of service. But yeah, they meet that need. But I think overall, I would say most truckers are not in favor of paying for parking. Like Scott mentioned already, they have so much to pay for in their operating costs, all these different taxes, and these, another thing that was mentioned before is that some of these spaces that people might charge for, they were already built, and some of them were already built using taxpayer dollars, right? And so now they're getting, it's almost like a toll, like a double taxation, which is ridiculous. So yeah, they can be useful. People still use them, but I think in general, they'd rather not if they didn't have to.
And to that point, though, too, I mean, there is a world in which, paid parking is a part of the solution here, because at the end of the day here, we're trying to figure out a way to solve this crisis. That's what the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act is about, contributing to solving the crisis.
Right. It's not the sole answer.
These are all just, avenues to take to work towards solving the crisis. There is a place for paid parking, as you kind of pointed to there, and the private market, the free market, will kind of dictate how that plays out. But again, with this report, when you paint it as, we have the solution right here, it's give us more money.
That's basically what it's stating, is that you don't need government funding. That's not the solution you want. The solution already exists. And it's kind of classic storytelling or marketing where you paint a bad guy and then you paint what the solution is. And so the bad guy obviously is that there's a perceived truck parking shortage, but there really isn't one. And the solution is...
Well, I was just going to say, it's not even that we're having a solution, because that implies that we have a problem. But they're saying there isn't a problem. There is no truck parking shortage.
This is the funny thing about it. And this is also what's also frustrating, is at one side, they're saying there is a problem, and then on another, they're saying there isn't. And they kind of go back and forth between the two, which makes it very confusing. It's kind of a head scratcher in general when you read through it, because they're contradicting themselves at times.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of a conundrum.
It is a conundrum. Yes, it is for sure. Andrew,
One of many.
one of many. Yes, under a bigger conundrum that is the truck parking shortage, which does exist.
Yeah.
Andrew, I know this has been something that you have been poring over for the past week or two, and we appreciate you coming in. Any final thoughts here, I guess, for folks out there in the context of everything we're talking about? And again, this is a lot to absorb because we're talking about a report that you kind of said there is
Yeah.
talking out of both sides of its mouth. It's asserting something that we know not to be true. Again, a lot to absorb here, but just maybe some final thoughts as we
Sure.
close this
Well,
up.
from the foundation perspective, from a research side of things, this is kind of how do I say this? It's kind of a good example of how not to do research.
Uh-huh.
I'll just say it that way. There's a big problem in research and scientific papers in general with being able to reproduce the results. There is no way anyone would be able to reproduce this.
Also with research, right? When you come to a thing, you don't come in already knowing what you want the conclusion to be.
Yes. You usually have a hypothesis or a
Right.
null hypothesis of some sort before you even begin. And that leads to some more validity in your findings. This is obviously, they don't come out and say it, but it seems to be implied that they already have their objective, right? And that's another thing. Usually research will say what their objectives are out in the beginning. Like, this is what we're studying. This is why we're studying. This is what we think we'll find. This is the data. This is our interpretation of the data, right? That's how it flows. This does not flow that way.
Well, there you go. There is no truck park, or wait, there is a
There
truck
is.
park. Now I'm confused.
Now Scott's confused.
There is not. Anyway.
You've had the Kool-Aid.
Yes. No. I've had too much coffee, maybe.
Well, I
yes.
can smell the caffeine. So.
Yes, there is a truck parking shortage. Again, we'll be talking more about this report, I know, in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah.
Andrew King, OID Foundation, we appreciate your help understanding all of this, as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
And with that, we'll take a break. Trucking with OIDA is back right after this. And welcome back to the show. New warning signs are emerging about the ways in which the technology inside commercial trucks poses a security threat. The National Motor Freight Traffic Association has been great on this topic, not just in sounding the alarm bell, but also providing information and advice as well. And we're about to get both and more from our next guest here. Artie Crawford is the association's Director of Cybersecurity, and he joins us on the line now from Florida, I believe. Artie, how we doing?
We're doing great. Thank you all very much for having me on today.
Yes, thanks for talking with us, because this is an important issue, perhaps one that maybe not enough people are talking about or focusing on. And I know we're going to talk about a few things that you are concerned about, and the association there as well. So let's get to unpacking here, Artie. All of this kind of centers, and this is probably a good starting point, centers around this white paper that you recently put out. Its focus is on something called the Made in China 2025 plan. I'm wondering if we can start there, because it is kind of the centerpiece of what we're talking about today, right? And I think maybe more importantly, the focus of what China is trying to do, and I guess is currently doing as well, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And it was an interesting doing the research for this paper, right? As you look at the salt typhoons and the volt typhoons and the aquatic pandas and the et cetera typhoons that are out there, right? Which each one of those just means a different bad guy group, for lack of better terms, right? We call them ATPs, advanced persistent threats, but they're actually like type style of attacks, like type style of tools that each group uses. When you kind of peel back that onion a little bit further, right, you find that each one of these attack groups is actually associated with the People's Republic of China. So that got us digging a little deeper, right, into, okay, why, how? And we've seen the FBI alerts come out. We've seen the CISA alerts come out. And as you start to dig a little deeper into this and start to understand the background, that this is part of a long-term plan that the Chinese government has to be embedded in our infrastructure, whether that's critical infrastructure, manufacturing, or the telecom industry, just to ensure that when the time is right, that they can do what they want to unabated.
I just had a kind of a chill kind of go through when you said when the time is right, or I guess when that decision is made. That sounds like an ominous. That's an ominous sounding kind of thing, right?
It is, but I don't mean it to be as ominous as it sounds.
Right.
But if you think about the ability to disrupt the supply chain when you choose as an adversary, right? That gives you a lot of flexibility on whether that's the movement of equipment or whether that's the movement of toilet paper, for that matter, right? So if I can disrupt your supply chain whenever I want to do that, then I can create confusion in a situation that may not be confusing.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Now, this is a way China is, getting a foothold on the technology front globally, and they've been successful. Do you know how prevalent Chinese manufactured products are in commercial trucks these days, and more specifically with regard to technology products inside trucks?
So there's a lot of research out there, and I'm truly one of those guys that say, liars use statistics, and statistics always lie, right? But I will say that it is a high percentage of most of the electronics that are manufactured or that are not produced, that are sold in the United States have some chip component that ties back to China. Now, whether that chip component is bad or good, that's for the FBI and all of those elite teams out there to decide whether those chip manufacturers in China have really broken the rules on what those chips are supposed to do. But if I can take just a second, like this type of stuff goes back to, about the 2000 double aught time frame when the Chinese were embedding chips in laptops, right, that were phoning home. And then you fast forward to probably 7 or 8 years ago when they started bringing the gantry cranes into the United States at a cheaper price. And all of these things keep coming back to the fact that, wait a minute, just because it's cheaper doesn't necessarily mean it's better. And just because it's cheaper doesn't necessarily mean it's safer either. So we've really got to start looking at it. And I think the whole purpose behind the paper and the research that we did in order to put forth the paper was to take this look at supply chain in a true holistic fashion, right? But to bring awareness to the industry that, hey, look, we really need to look beyond the retail shelves of, your Best Buys or your Amazons of the world and truly look behind the curtain and see where it's made, how it's made, and what chipsets are in it.
You bring up a good point there, Artie, because we know for the most part, as a general statement, I guess, that Chinese products, at least typically, are cheaper, which is one big reason that they are appealing. And you're kind of talking about that there, especially for owner-operators and carriers that are working on thin margins, right? Every penny saved is a penny earned for them. When you look at the cab of a truck, if you're looking at a truck, I guess it's in its entirety, which products are we talking about here? I mean, is it ELDs? Is it dash cameras? You're talking about essentially anything with a chip in it, right? Because that chip gives them a doorway into that technology, should they choose, or however you put it, when they decide to make that decision to unleash whatever they want to unleash. Is that right?
Yes, I don't want to be fear-mongering, and not all companies are products of bad Chinese hardware, right?
Sure.
So I want to make that pretty clear right up front. And please don't keep moving me down that path.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
But there are some products, and the answer to the question is actually yes, right? It ranges from dash cams to ELDs to it could even be, in certain cases, cell phones or cell phone carriers. Your Wi-Fi or your router that you have if you have a Wi-Fi router in the cab of your truck, it could be that. Or, you've decided that you want to use a small switch so you can plug several devices in that are not Wi-Fi. That Soho router, could be a product of that. FBI has released detailed information on the TP-Link, home switches, right?
Yeah.
So I really only want to bring out to light the ones that have actually been called out in public, and bring awareness to the ones that may eventually be called out in public, later on.
Yeah. And the concern with that, again, because this technology is everywhere, that if China were to decide, or entities within China, I guess we should say, were to decide to interfere in the supply chain, would it be relatively easy knowing what we know now? Would there be enough safeguards in place to maybe have some disruptions here or there, but widespread disruptions would not be as likely? I guess I'm asking, what does that interference look like if and when that were to happen, maybe on an individual scale and maybe on a bigger scale as well? I know it may be hard to answer, but what is your sense of what we know about it?
So I think the FBI and CISA, and then our Five Eyes components, right? The Brits, the Aussies, the Kiwis, and the Canucks, right? I think they've done a really good job of trying to articulate the depth that they've been embedded in our communication systems, right? The depth that they've been embedded in our critical infrastructure, whether that's manufacturing, gas, electric, and water, or so on and so forth, or transportation in specific, right? What we haven't seen, and this is a good thing, right? What we haven't seen is the testing of any of these type of, attacks in the wild, which is great, right? That means that we may have some of the safeguards in place that, that are stopping these attacks when they try to test them, or if they're, pre-positioning certain things. And when they do test them, like with the big telecom with Salt Typhoon, right? We saw that during that instantiation, the FBI was very clear on calling them out that they were in our major telecom providers. So I think we have some assurances in place, and it could be hit or miss. And I'd like to hope for the best on that we have some of the very best and brightest minds that are wrapping their heads around this problem and trying to understand the depth of the infiltration. It's one of those things that we don't truly understand as Americans, what a 100-year war is actually, is actually made up of, and it's made up of this patience and this willingness to find the right time and the right place to execute, what they want to execute. So I think that those are very salient points that need to be made, that all hope is not lost, right?
Sure.
We are collectively increasing our cyber maturity across the board, especially in the transportation industry. And the more awareness and community talking about it, or community outreach that we can do in the community, it is really going to help us bringing the awareness to the problem, and making sure that, okay, I'm going to take some level of cyber maturity in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, good
Absolutely,
advice.
yeah.
I can't help but think that I know myself, and I'm sure people listening are wondering, what would China have to gain from doing these things that you're talking about?
So I'm no poli-sci major, but I think that it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly, right? And I'll use the Seventh Fleet for the Navy. There's a reason why an aircraft carrier is as big as it is and has as many ships as it does, that surround it, right? That's to show dominance and force and strength, a projection of strength, right? Way far away from Washington, D.C. So when you look at that, being able to execute an attack on our soil shows this dominance of force that may not be perceived as is possibly a weaker nation. But again, I'm not a poli-sci major, and I've really not tried to go down that path where we're trying to figure out what was the purpose.
Right.
The biggest purpose will be to have disruptions and understand the supply chain and the transportation lanes of how things would move, how goods and services would move across the country in a time when they would, if in fact something were to happen, how those goods and services move across the country so that they can help or they can hinder that movement.
And that's something they could already be doing right now, right? With the technology that's out there in terms of what's in trucks and how it's being used within the supply chain. They might already have a decent idea of that. Is that accurate? Maybe.
So I think it's been readily reported on that between one of the trying to be banned social media websites that a lot of the younger generation uses without saying the name out loud. I'm hoping we understand who we're talking about.
We do,
right?
yes. Yep.
That capturing that just the set of demographics and the mathematics that go behind capturing that demographics, you can try to understand what goods and services would be moved based on the age groups and the demographics that would be pulled off of that app. Then you add in things like Soho routers, small office, home office type of routers, possibly even TVs that are manufactured there that we plug into the internet or hook up to our Wi-Fi and capture our passwords. So we could try to collectively build a demographic of not only age but income brackets, and just this interesting part. Like we talk in on the coast of Florida that we're God's waiting room, right? It's not hard to see that the number of people using that app are far fewer than the number of people using that app in, let's say, New York City, right? Because we're just not app friendly in that age group. So you could start to understand those demographics. And I think that understanding those sets of demographics allows a deeper insight into the collective culture of a nation. So there's a lot of purpose for it, and some of it might not be readily understood.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Now that we've scared the daylights out of everybody, let's talk a little bit.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. But I mean, yeah, and we're joking, but I think it's important that we talk about this because I don't think a lot of people think about this aspect necessarily.
No.
I know there are plenty of truck drivers who are reticent and do not want technology like this in their vehicle for different reasons. And I think this is one of them, for fear of, whatever door they may be opening for cybersecurity threats. But, as we look at the big problem, it feels in a lot of ways like the horse is kind of already out of the barn here. But we've got Congress. They have been talking about this in different forms, in different ways. They're paying attention to it. I think they understand the potential for something bad here. To my knowledge, they haven't really made a lot of progress on, figuring out what the solution is or the safeguards that are in place there. What are you seeing from, I guess, policymakers, lawmakers, people that have a means of kind of stopping some of this stuff? What do you see them doing right now that you like, that you don't like? What would you like to see them do?
So I think that we're actually moving in a steady progression forward, which is absolutely great news, right? First, getting a bunch of people that all disagree to actually agree about something up there in that crazy little area of the country, inside the national capital region, sometimes is interesting, right?
Yeah.
But they're all agreed on the fact that this is a problem. Some are a little more to the right than that, and some are a little bit more to the left of how big the problem is. But it actually doesn't matter because they're all on the same sheet of music and say this is a problem. That being the case, right, the FTC and the FCC are both seriously looking at the processes to bring imported technology into the United States. How that technology is vetted, how it's tested, who's involved in the testing, how is that testing being done against a standard that makes sense. So all of these type of different little things, there is a lot of legislation that is coming through right now that is going to start to enhance and give the FTC and the FCC a little more power, so to say, a little more teeth in the tiger.
Yeah.
That will stop some of this, may have the propensity to stop some of this stuff from coming into the States and affecting our technology stacks.
Well, and a big part of this too, and we've heard this conversation in recent months as well, is that there are so many products that are now produced overseas that are imported over here. And in this case, we're talking things like chips, right? And I know you've spoken, I think maybe it was in a webinar recently, You spoke about the importance of bringing chip manufacturing back to the U.S. so we're not leaving that door open for foreign entities to get their hands on whatever they want to. That's a key component of this, don't you think?
I absolutely agree. And I don't think there's a way you can convince me that bringing chip manufacturing back to the U.S. is not one of the strongest policies that we could make. Now, unfortunately, convince all my kids to give up their Apple phone because the chips weren't made here in the United States.
Good luck. Yeah, good luck with that one.
I'm not certain that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But I do think that it actually strengthens our technology stack by bringing that chip manufacturing back to the United States.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, anytime we talk about cybersecurity and this kind of stuff, it feels overwhelming and it feels like, what can I do? I'm curious your advice, to the average truck driver. What can they do to keep themselves safe?
So with a shameless plug, right, I'm going to say go out to the NMFTA/cybersecurity website, right? It's nmfta.org/cybersecurity. And we have just a multitude of different references that from the independent operator to the small fleet to a mid-sized fleet to how does cyber-enabled cargo theft affect your fleet and your bottom line. We have a framework out there that talks about how you can reduce your exposure to cyber-enabled cargo theft. And then we also, later this month, will have a vendor checklist out there that allows somebody to take a look at it. And when they start working with a broker or they start working with another carrier, they can look at it and go, hey, I can ask you these questions and I can understand your level of either cybersecurity influence, maturity, or whether you care or not. And if you don't care, maybe I don't want to work with you as a broker,
Yeah.
So we have a lot of resources out there. And one of the things, Scott, I think is, and Ashley, is I really want to bring up, right, is we actually partnered with ELIDA that in the month of September, starting on the 10th, right, and then 3 consecutive Wednesdays after that, we are doing a 3-part webinar series for training for the small fleet and independent operator. And they can go out and register on the site. And it's going to kind of take and walk them through the step-by-step basics of, I'm not going to secure everything, but I'm going to be more secure at the end of this series than what you were to start with. And we're not going to charge you a lot of money, and it's not going to cost you a lot of money to go and do that.
And I think that's great because, like you said, Ashley, it's so confusing, it's
It
complicated,
feels overwhelming,
and you've got products out there that say they're made in the USA, but really
they have components from
everything inside of it's made elsewhere. White labeling, I know, is an issue as well, right? With multiple ELDs, for example, being essentially the same device with just a different brand on it. It's confusing out there, and I know again, it's good that someone like yourself is on the side of kind of educating people, and I guess that's what it comes down to, right? Is just kind of knowing what you're comfortable with as an individual, knowing what you can afford based on your operations, and kind of making the best decisions there.
I like to think of it as when we go to the casino, we have an idea how much money we're willing to lose, right? Our appetite for risk, right? Now, I'm one of these guys, if I lose $5, I'm really sad.
Yep.
Right.
Same. Yep.
But we got other guys that go to the casino and, they drop, $100K and it's like, that's no big deal.
That's Ashley. That's Ashley.
I wish.
Yep.
That's Ashley.
Yep. That's Ashley. Huge.
But it's understanding, if you don't understand what your risk is, at least when you walk up to a craps table or a blackjack table, you understand what your risk is, right?
Yeah.
In this cybersecurity world, you're not really understanding your risk. So once you can understand your risk, you can set that appetite, and then you can decide, okay, I'm going to do these 4 or 5 things because the rest of it I'm okay with, right? Or the rest of it I'll figure out how to mitigate a different way. And we like to tell people all the time, it's like eating an elephant, right? Unfortunately, you got to eat the whole thing. But it looks so overwhelming that you're like, okay, how do I just realize I got to take one bite at a time? And that's truly what we have to do in this cybersecurity domain is we got to take one bite at a time. And as we do that, we realize that we become a harder target. and the bad guys will actually look for the lesser target. And then, in that old adage of I don't have to run faster than the bear, I just have to run faster than the slowest guy.
Yeah.
I just have to be more secure than somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, great advice all around. Obviously, we'll have more information on those webinars here on the show. Artie, give us one more time. Give us the website and just a quick place where people can go.
It's nmfta.org /cybersecurity, or just run around on the page for a few minutes until you find the tab that says cybersecurity, right? You'll find a whole plethora of resources in there that will, that start with the owner operator and kind of build out on how to eat that elephant, so to say. And then it deals with things like, cyber enabled cargo theft and how to talk to a vendor. And honestly, truly, send an email to the cyber team at NMFTA, and they will take the time to answer it. And it's cyber@nmfta.org, right? And you can send an email, and we will help you out. We'll set you on the right path. And we're, trust me, we won't even make fun of you, because there's not a story we haven't heard from where a person is and where they're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So give us a call. We'll help you however we can.
Yeah, definitely no dumb questions when it comes to all this, because it is complicated and confusing. Artie, we really appreciate your time.
Yes.
Ashley and I are going to go ahead to the casino now, and she's going to drop $100K at
I wish
the
I
craps
could.
table.
I would
Nice.
taking it to the casino, but yeah, I wish I had it.
There you go. Artie, thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much for having me, and you have a great day.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
House products provide your diesel with total performance and protection. Use Diesel Defender for a full system cleaning. Start treatment early with Diesel Treat to prevent gelling all season, and protect yourself from winter emergencies with Diesel Lifeline. Stay moving with House.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
And our thanks again to Artie Crawford of NMFTA. Looking forward to that seminar next week. You mentioned where to find it. Thank you. That's one of those acronyms that I cannot.
It's long.
NMFTA. It does not roll off the tongue.
It doesn't.
But they are doing great work.
They are doing excellent work. Yes.
Yeah. What do we got coming up tomorrow, Ashley?
The guys from Road Law.
Road Law.
James Manella and Jeff McConnell. Great guys to talk to. They've been in the biz for many years.
Yeah, a while. They've seen it all.
They have seen it all.
Heard it all.
Yeah.
Done it all.
Talked to them for years, and we were like, you know what? We need to get them on the horn.
Yeah, let's get into their backstory, find out what makes them tick.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll look forward to that. How they get into this crazy world that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
There you go. That's coming up tomorrow. That's all for today.
That's all for today.
Ashley, thank you.
Appreciate you listening.
And thanks to everybody out there. Today's episode of Trucking with OOIDA was brought to you by a dedicated team of people that includes Jim Fetzer, Keegan White, Tennille Flick, and Kim Boren.
Got thoughts? We'd love to hear them. Call us at 1-800-324-6856 and leave us a message. Or you can send us an email to podcast@ooida.com, and we might include it on the show.